Good evening. Israel is experiencing days of horror, sorrow, and rage. A week ago, we experienced such horror. Yesterday, I visited in Ashkelon the family of one of the hostages murdered in cold blood. A day earlier, I spoke to several of the families of these murdered hostages. It tears your heart out. I said to them that I'm sorry. I apologize that we didn't get them out. We worked so hard to get them. We were close, but we didn't. And they changed the torment. Our families worried about their loved ones to families grieving for their fallen beloved. That sentiment I know, because I belong to that family, but it's a horror. We also lost brave policemen and brave soldiers who are fighting in the Gaza front. And I embrace their families as well. All our people do. On October 7th, we experienced the worst savagery in this century. On October 7th, we experienced the worst savagery meted on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. These savages massacred our people, 1,200 civilians. They beheaded our men. They raped our women and then murdered them. They burned babies alive. They took 255 of our people hostages to their underground dungeons. That's a horror that the world saw and responded to initially. It's important that we remember it. But we were given a reminder, a terrible reminder. Last week, when these savages murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood, they riddled them with bullets, then they shot each of them in the head. Some of them several times. And these are the savages, these are the terrorists that Iran implanted next to our border, as elsewhere. And we're committed to defeating them, to extirpating this evil from our midst. I want to talk to you today about some of the things that we must do to achieve that goal, including the questions of the Philadelphia corridor. But before I do that, I want to give your readers and viewers some context, because often you see maps of Israel, you think it's a Goliath. Well, I'd like to give you first an overview of where Israel is. This is the Middle East. And this is the entire Arab world. And this is Israel. It's one of the world's tiniest countries. I give it the thumb test. This is a big one, so you need a bigger thumb. But it's a tiny country. It's one of the tiniest countries on the planet. It's, I think, 1/10 of 1% of the territory of the Arab world. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's 2/10 of 1%. It goes from the river is right here, that's the Jordan River, to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So when Hamas is talking about liberating Palestine from the river to the sea, basically what they're saying is destroy Israel. And the entire width of this is probably around the width of the Washington Beltway. It's all together at its widest point, about 50 miles, right here. Tiny. And here's Gaza there. This is the red thing that you see here. That's Gaza. Now I want to zoom in. When I zoom in, remember how tiny this is. Remember the distances here. Now take a look. Here it is enlarged. This is Israel. This is the Mediterranean Sea. The Jordan River is right here. This is Egypt and the Sinai Desert. Now look at Gaza. Where is Gaza? Gaza is implanted in this tiny country, 30 miles from Tel Aviv, 40 miles from our capital, Jerusalem, 30 miles from Beersheba. These are three of Israel's largest cities. Gaza is within spitting distance to them. Israel, up to the disengagement agreement of 2005, Israel controlled this border under an agreement with Egypt after the Camp David peace accords. We controlled this part, which is called the Philadelphia corridor. I'll talk about that in a minute. Right down to Eilat in the Red Sea. This was our border. And while there was, I would say, a minimal amount of terrorism, there wasn't. We didn't really face a big problem. Let's zoom in on that a bit more. Here's Gaza Strip enlarged. Again, this is the situation in Gaza before the disengagement of 2005. And the Gaza Strip is firmly under Israeli control. We control the maritime border. You can't smuggle in weapons. They tried, but we stopped it. You control the land border. And you control this border between the Sinai Desert, Egypt, and Gaza, the Gaza Strip. It's controlled. This is the Philadelphia corridor. This is the Rafah crossing, controlled by the IDF. Now look at the distances from Gaza. It's 4 miles to another city in Israel called Ashkelon, where I visited that bereaved family yesterday. It's a population of 170,000 people. They're 4 miles away. But some of our communities, like Kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the hardest hit, is 1 mile away from Gaza. Kfar Aza is less than 1 mile away. It's literally walking distance, okay? And so as long as we control this, these communities, sometimes they were harassed by this rocket or that rocket, but it was marginal. We control the security situation. But something happened in 2005. Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza. It just went out. It took out everything. It took out the army. It stripped, uprooted communities, took out 10,000 people. The army left the Philadelphia corridor. Here's what happened. This is Gaza after the disengagement. And Hamas now has a weapon smuggling operation nurtured by Iran, financed by Iran, supplied by Iran, delivered by Iran. And here's what happened. That Philadelphia corridor became completely porous. The other borders controlled by us. But once this was perforated, even though the policy of Egypt was to prevent it, it didn't necessarily work. It didn't succeed. And this border, once we left our side of the Philadelphia corridor, rockets went in, missiles went in, drones went in, ammo went in, weapons manufacturing equipment came in, tunnel drilling equipment came in. Once we got out, once we left the Philadelphia corridor, Iran could carry out its plan to turn Gaza into a base, a terrorist enclave that would endanger not only the communities around it, but would endanger Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beersheba, the entire country of Israel. It became a huge terrorist base because we left that corridor. So we vowed, or I would say all this, you have to understand that the centrality of the Philadelphia corridor to the arming of Gaza, to the arming of Hamas, and this all led to the October 7th massacre, which Hamas has vowed, proudly vowed, to do again and again and again. We vowed that they won't be able to do it. So we set, as far as Gaza is concerned, 3 war goals. The first war goal was to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities. The second was to free our hostages. And the third was to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. And all 3 of those goals, all 3 of them, go through Israel's control of the Philadelphia corridor. And it's obvious why. You want to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, you can't let Hamas rearm. It's obvious. So you have to control the corridor. You can't let them have... By the way, it's not only to prevent them from terrorizing us, attacking us, it's also to prevent Hamas or any other terrorist organization from terrorizing the people of Gaza. Gaza cannot have a future if Gaza remains porous and you can enable rearmament of terrorists through the Philadelphia corridor. The second thing is to release the hostages. First of all, you can't prevent, if you leave this corridor, you can't prevent Hamas from not only not smuggling weapons in, you can't prevent them from not smuggling terrorists, hostages out. It's walking distance, nothing. They can easily smuggle hostages out here to the Sinai Desert in Egypt. They disappear. It's crossing distance. The distance is nothing. It's meters away. They cross the barrier above ground. They don't even have to go underground. They disappear in the Sinai, and then they end up in Iran or in Yemen. They're gone forever. And you need something to squeeze them, to prevent them, to put pressure on them to release the remaining hostages. So if you want to release the hostages, you've got to control the Philadelphia corridor. And the third goal of ensuring that we prevent Gaza from being again a threat to Israel, it's clear Gaza must be demilitarized. And it can only be demilitarized if the Philadelphia corridor remains under firm control and is not a supply line for armaments and for terror equipment. I think that's clear to most Israelis, to all Israelis. But a question has arisen. That may be the case. But why don't you leave Gaza for 42 days? You could come back. Well, aside from what I said, that they could smuggle the terrorists out, wait a minute. Come back. I want to show you what they've got under Gaza. I didn't show you that. So I want to show you that. This is what they have under the Philadelphia corridor. Just so you understand the supply lines we're talking about. This is one of the tunnels there. Look at the engineering. Look at the investment here. Look at what they've got. We've got dozens of such tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor. To give you an impression of the size of these things, this is a soldier. This is a tunnel. You could drive a truck through this. Yeah, indeed, you could. Here's a truck. Or it's a Humvee. This is a huge, huge problem. Now you're just going to walk away. It's obvious we have to control it, right? I think once you see this, you understand that. But then the next question is, okay, you leave and you come back. That's what they tell us. Okay. We'll have complete international legitimacy to come back. Sorry, we've gone down that route. We're down that route when we left Lebanon, and people said, you can leave Lebanon and you can come back. The first time they fire a rocket, you can come back. The world will support you. It didn't. And we've been out of Lebanon for 24 years. They said the same thing when we left Gaza and the disengagement. They said, you can leave. And the first rocket, I remember Sharon, Prime Minister Sharon said this to me. First rocket, above ground or below ground. We'll be able to go back in. It's been 20 years, we haven't gone back in. Because you all know and understand that the international community, including friendly countries under enormous domestic pressure because of the propaganda that's leveled against Israel and against them, there'll be enormous international pressure not to come back. What is their message? End the war, end the war. And so when we want to come back and resume, we'll pay an exorbitant price in many fields, including in the lives of our men. To come back, it's not just a military question. It's a military, political, strategic question. And we make that decision. We're not going to leave. 42 days, we're there. I don't want to leave in order to come back in when I know that we didn't come back in, and it's not going to take another 24 years to come back in, and God knows what price we'll have, how many more massacres, how many more kidnappings, how many more hostages, how many more rapes. It's not going to happen. So people said, yeah, but if you stay, this will kill the deal. And I say, such a deal will kill us. And there won't be a deal that way. This is a false narrative. I'm willing to make a deal. I made one already. One that brought back 150 hostages, 117 alive. And I'm committed to return the remaining 101. I'll do everything I can to get them in. But leaving Philadelphia does not advance the release of the hostages, because the deal cannot be advanced. They'll give you a minor part, if they give anything. Keep the rest. Go and argue. You know when they started giving us hostages? When we went into Philadelphia. When we went into Rafah. When we controlled the Rafah crossing. That's when they felt the pressure. As long as they didn't feel the pressure, they wouldn't do it. The first batch, the first deal that we got was a result of our invasion, the military pressure we put in. They gave us the hostages. After that, they thought, well, we'll have the international pressure turn on Israel, so we won't have to make any concessions. But after Rafah, their tune changed. And they began to change. If we leave Rafah, if we leave the Philadelphia corridor, there won't be any pressure. We won't get the hostages. I said I'm willing to make a deal. The real obstacle to making a deal is not Israel. And it's not me. It's Hamas. It's Sinwar. On April 27th, I put forward a proposal by Israel, which Secretary Blinken called extremely generous. On May 31st, having met Blinken again, I said we agreed to the US-backed proposal, and Hamas refused. On August 16th, the US brought forth what they call the final bridging proposal. Again, we accepted, Hamas refused. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said, Israel accepted the US proposal. Now Hamas has to do the same. On August 28th, that's a week ago, the deputy CIA director said, Israel showed seriousness in the negotiations. Now Hamas must make the deal. This was last week. So I ask you, what has changed? What has changed in this week? What's changed is that they murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood. Now the world will seriously demand that Israel make concessions after this massacre? What message does this send to Hamas? I'll tell you what the message is. Murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. That's not only illogical, it's not only immoral, it's downright insane. So it's not going to happen. We have red lines. Before the murder, they haven't changed. We'll hold to them. But we also have had flexibility. And I'll tell you one thing, Hamas will pay for this. That you can be assured. We'll make sure that we extract them. That price from them. But we are firm on our red lines, including the Philadelphia corridor, for the reasons I described here. I'm flexible where I can be. I'm firm when I have to be. I think there is the possibility of getting this deal if we stick to this strategy. I said before, we got 150 hostages out because we combined a firm stance with military pressure. And I said that Hamas, after that, relied on international pressure, but it weakened. And then we went into Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor, so it got strengthened. And they were beginning to balk. A condition that they said they'd never accept, a red line, is that we must commit to getting out of Gaza and enabling Hamas basically to take over Gaza again. End the war, get out, let them retake Gaza. That's obviously something we couldn't do. They said there'll never be a deal. Well, they started caving in there after we took the Philadelphia corridor. And then they started backing off. You know why they waited? Why they started backing off? Because they waited for Iran to start a general war with Israel. That didn't happen. So then they waited for Hezbollah to start a general war with Israel. That didn't happen either. So now they resort to the final tactic. They're going to sow discord and create international pressure, again using the hostages, even after the murder. And this is something that's not new because they started this a year ago. You should see this. I mean, this is their tactic. This is Hamas orders for psychological warfare found in Hamas underground command post on January 29th. That's right after the beginning of the war, 2024. And this is the original document in Arabic. Our soldiers found it. And here's what it says. Push photos and videos of hostages. Put it out in the media. That creates an enormous psychological pressure. Who's not affected by it? Any human being seeing these people, young people from those dungeons. An increased psychological pressure on defense minister. Third, continue blaming Netanyahu. And fourth, claim ground operation will not release hostages. Hamas is not that's not only their talking points, it's their strategy. And their idea is this will sow internal discord and increase international pressure on Israel. That's what they hope to achieve. And they hope it won't happen. I can tell you why it won't happen. I'll tell you why they'll fail. Because overwhelmingly, the people of Israel are united. They understand everything that I said here. Overwhelmingly. You should know that. It's important. And the second thing is, we're committed to achieving our goals. All three goals. Destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities, releasing all our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel anymore. And all these require standing firm on the things that will ensure the achievement of these goals. And with God's help, and with our people's will, and with the courage of our soldiers, we'll achieve all goals.
Prime Minister, thank you. The mother of, can you hear me, sir?
Sure.
The mother of Almog Sarusi, one of the murdered hostages, says you sacrificed her son on the altar of the Philadelphia corridor. If the price of your refusal to withdraw from the Egypt-Gaza border is more hostages are killed, is that a price you are prepared to pay? And is that a price the people of Israel will accept?
I can understand the great torment that the mother of this murdered hostage feels. I can understand her rage. I can understand her sorrow. So I'm not going to stand in judgment of that. I'm not going to argue with it. I'm just going to talk about the facts. I'm committed to getting all of them out. I got more than half out, and more than half of the hostages alive out because we employed the pressure points. We leave the pressure, we're going to get no one out. I'm committed as the Prime Minister of Israel to two things. They're right here. The first one is to achieve the release of the hostages, and the second is to protect the security of Israel and make sure that we have no more hostage taking, no more murders, no more rapes, and no more rocketing of Israel. Both of them. We have to have this and this together. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm committed to do.
If I can follow up, sir, if the Philadelphia corridor is so critical as you say, why is it you left it 7-8 months into the Israeli ground offensive before seizing it?
Well, it was critical also to destroy Hamas, to kill about 20,000 of their operatives, to kill their senior military commanders, to get Gaza City, to get the Shifa Hospital, which was a major headquarters, to get Khan Yunis, to get the central camps, and to get Rafah, obviously. So this was the military plan that the military and the political echelon agreed upon. We were never going to leave, I was never going to leave Rafah alone, and you know that. And I also not going to leave Philadelphia alone. I said that 20 years ago. I said it's critical that we not leave Philadelphia. When Sharon did the disengagement, I said we have to get there. So we got there. It took a while to do, but it was a progression of military advancement that produced the result. So we're there now. Now once we're in, now we'll leave. You know we'll leave, we won't come back. You know it, everybody here knows it. Everybody here knows what pressure will be brought on us so that we don't come back. What price we'll have to pay if we do want to come back. It's just not going to happen. We're going to be there, despite the pressure.
CNN, please.
This is Prime Minister Jeremy Diamond, CNN. I spoke to Aviva Siegel tonight, a a former hostage whose husband is still being held in Gaza. She told me that she believes that you are sentencing her husband, Keith, to die by prioritizing the Philadelphia corridor over a deal. And she has this question for you. Is Keith going to come home alive or dead?
I'll do everything to make sure that Keith and all the other hostages come back. I'm telling you that if we relieve the pressure, if we get out of the Philadelphia corridor, we're not going to get the hostages back. Certainly we're going to condemn a lot of them to stay there. We could get a few out. They'll give us that. But they'll leave a lot with them. We won't have the pressure point. And something else will happen. We will not be able to come back. So we won't release all the hostages. And we won't achieve the defenses that we must have to prevent more October 7th again and again and again. That is my responsibility. I can understand the torment of families. They don't, none of them believe that we'll get the hostages in the first batch either. None of them, few of them, quite a few of them didn't believe it. And they came and they said, you have to get them out, you have to get them out. You're not going to give them out, you have to make this concession or that concession. I didn't make those concessions, and we got them out. So it's very hard, I don't stand in judgment of these tormented souls because they're undergoing an agony that is hard to fathom, and I understand that. But the responsibility of leaders is not merely to share the sentiment, the emotion, but also to exercise judgment, the correct judgment, to make sure that these horrors do not happen again. I believe that our strategy is the best way to achieve both goals, both freeing the hostages and ensuring that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again.
And secondly, sir, more than 40,000 Palestinians have now been killed in Gaza, a majority of whom are civilians, and these numbers are from the Palestinian Ministry of Health, but they are backed up by the United States, by international organizations. Humanitarian conditions in Gaza have degraded so much that diseases like polio and hepatitis A are now spreading. We have seen countless children be orphaned. We have seen countless mothers lose their children. How much is too much, sir? At what point is it time to end this war?
Well, we'll end the war when we achieve our war goals of making sure that Hamas can't repeat such atrocities. But we're fighting this war in a just war with just means. In fact, with means that no other army has ever fought. No other army has taken the precautions that Israel has taken, sometimes at great risk, to make sure that we minimize the number of casualties. You talked about polio. We enabled now massive vaccination of polio. We want 90% of the Gazan people of Gaza vaccinated. I think 200,000 I think were vaccinated today. We put in 1 million tons of food, 1 million tons of aid, 700,000 tons of food. That's unheard of. We've taken, because we think that every civilian death is a tragedy. For Hamas, every civilian death is a strategy. For us, it's a tragedy. So we've taken precautions to avoid civilian deaths that no army on earth, on urban warfare, has taken. We've issued millions of text messages, millions of flyers, hundreds of thousands of phone calls. We actually phone people and say, get out. We lose the element of surprise. So as a result of that, in the most densely packed urban warfare theater in history, where you have 35,000 Hamas terrorists, 50 meters above ground, 50 meters below ground, in the most intricate and complex underground terror tunnel network on Earth. We've been able to achieve the lowest ratio of civilians to combatant deaths in the history of modern urban warfare. It's 1-to-1, even by those numbers of the Palestinian Health Ministry, because we can guarantee we've killed probably around 18,000 terrorists, certainly no less than 17,000. So the ratio is about 1-to-1. But recently, it's gone down precipitously. You know when? We went into Rafah. And you remember what the international community and the international press and many of you reported before that. You said they're going to be stuck there. There are 1.4 million people in Gaza. They moved from the north to the south. You're going to have thousands, 20,000 killed. You're going to have a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe. They had no place to go, no food to eat. Now report honestly, because here's what happened. They all left. They went to the humanitarian zone, which is 2 miles away, less, on the beach. They have tents. We supplied tents for 150,000 people. The aid agencies supplied the rest, and some of them carried their own tents. They have a place. We supplied water lines, sewage lines, food. There's more to be done. Medical. So now we know how many people were killed. How many terrorists, because we counted them. And we just passed 2,000. Terrorists, body counts of terrorists. The people left. How many civilians died? I asked the commander of the division that did the Rafah operation and the Philadelphia corridor. He said, Prime Minister, there are hardly any civilian deaths because everybody left. They heeded our warnings. But he said there were probably 24, and most of them occurred, 24, and most of them occurred when one of our bombs hit a Hamas ammunition depot that was planted inside a residential area. 40 people died, about 20 were terrorists, but 20 were civilians. And he said that's most of the deaths. That's the lowest ratio of non-combatants to combatants in the history of urban warfare. That's it. Now report honestly, because you accuse us of something that is outrageous. And in fact, the accusations against us are outrageously false. Humanitarian aid? 1 million trucks of aid, 1 million tons of aid? 700,000 tons of food? A deliberate starvation policy? You can say anything. Doesn't make it true. You repeat a lie over and over and over again. It assumes the cachet of self-evident truth, but it's false. Israel is doing, and the Israeli army is doing, something that no other army has done in history and will continue to do that. I'm not going to change my policies. Humanitarian policies, vaccination policies, combat policies to minimize civilian casualties.
In BBC News, Mr. Prime Minister, Anthony Blinken said he heard directly from you that you had endorsed a clear schedule and locations for the withdrawal of troops. Did you tell him that you would withdraw troops from the Philadelphia corridor at any point in a deal?
No, I said I think you're conflating here two things. Number one, I agreed to reduce the number of troops along the Philadelphia corridor, okay? Because we don't need a division and a half on this 8-mile corridor. We don't need that, okay? They can both protect themselves and prevent the smuggling of terrorists, of the hostages outside, and keep the corridor intact and prevent its porous perforation. So we don't need that much, and I said we can reduce the number of troops, and we did. But I think the other thing they're asking is what happens in phase 2. Okay, we are talking about phase 1, 42 days. We stay there. It's obvious. Again, in somewhat reduced presence because we don't need as large a force. But we also agreed to begin discussions about a permanent ceasefire. And the conditions that we shall have for a permanent ceasefire must include a situation where the Philadelphia corridor cannot be perforated. Somebody has to be there. Somebody has to be there. Look, I don't care. Bring me anyone who will actually show us, not on paper, not in words, not in a slide, but on the ground, day after day, week after week, month after month, that they can actually prevent the recurrence of what happened there before. We're open to consider it. But that's, I don't see that happening. And until that happens, I don't see that happening right now. And until that happens, we're there. You wanted to ask another question, but go ahead.
CBS,
Yeah,
CBS,
go ahead.
please.
Okay.
CBS.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm Elizabeth Palmer from CBS. President Biden said you were not doing enough to reach a hostage deal. How do you interpret that, and what's your response?
I think I've already answered that. I'm just talking about the facts, just the facts. I said that in April, we gave an extraordinary generous offer, not my words, Secretary Blinken. On May 31st, we accepted the American proposal. Hamas refused. On August 16th, we accepted the second American proposal, the final bridging proposal. Hamas, we accepted, Hamas again refused. On just last week, as I said, the deputy CIA director said that Israel has been serious about the negotiations, Hamas is not. So I've gone out of my way, I've given leeway to our negotiating teams 5 times. 5 times. And I have areas of flexibility, but where I have to be firm, I'm firm. Where I can be flexible, I'm flexible. But in fact, the obstacle has been Hamas from the beginning. Everybody knows that. Secretary Blinken said that. Others said that. We all know that. Should we do more? Well, we have a saying in Hebrew. Mivchan hamtziut, I'll translate that, is the test of results, okay? The result is we've achieved the release of more than half the hostages, and a lot more than half of the living hostages. But as far as I'm concerned, there's still a task to be done more. And yes, we'll do more, because I'm committed to getting them out, all of them, and we'll get them out in the right combination of military pressure, negotiating pressure, and negotiating flexibility where we can be. That is the truth. So I would direct the pressure and the rage where it belongs, on those who took these hostages, those who keep them in those dark dungeons, and those who massacre them in cold blood. It's Hamas. It's Sinwar.
Thank you. Bloomberg, Dan Williams.
Thank you. Dan Williams from Bloomberg. Back in April, you said Israel was but a step away from victory. A month later, your national security advisor said the war would last into 2025. Now, a few months on, where do things stand? When will this war end? And a related question, please. A year ago, you were fitted with a pacemaker. I believe at times you were fitted with a halter to monitor the pacemaker. You said yesterday you sleep 2 hours a night. In your televised briefing, you get a couple hours sleep.
Did I say 2 hours a night? I'll correct that.
That may have been in jest. Nonetheless, you're under enormous stress. Given the course of the war, given it appears to be open-ended, given the march of time, do you believe you're in a position to sustain the management of this war?
Sorry, your first question was?
First question was about the timeline for the war, given that you said in April it was a step away from victory, and then a month later, your national security advisor said it would last into the coming year.
Thank you. What I said, or what I meant to say, was that we're a step away from the critical thing that will pave our way to victory. I didn't think that we could have this victory if we didn't go into Rafah. And I withstood quite a bit of international pressure and American pressure to go into Rafah and to Philadelphia. I thought there's no way we can end this war without it, for the reasons I explained. So we did it. I said this before we completed this task. And we did indeed complete this task, and now we're in a position to destroy Hamas militarily. There's still work to be done to destroy its governance capability. Primarily, I don't want to run Gaza, but I want to take away from Hamas the key thing that they have, other than the military, which we're destroying. You know, we're killed their certain senior commanders, we're killing their operators, we're destroying their tunnels, we're destroying their weapons manufacturing capability, we're stopping the cash. They don't have any cash. We found millions and millions of shekels in cash in these tunnels. They don't have any more cash. Part of the reason they're squeezed is because we control their money machine, which was the Rafah crossing. They don't have that. So we're choking them. But there's one thing that they have, which is the distribution of food. They basically will let the trucks come in. We let all those trucks come in. And Hamas' strategy is to steal, hoard, and gouge. That's what they do. They take the food, they take exorbitant prices. They steal the food, charge exorbitant prices from Gaza, from the Gaza population. And that's how they they hope to continue to survive. And we have to take that away from them. Again, I don't want to run Gaza, I don't want to administer Gaza, but I want to take this away from them. So we still have to do that, but we're well ahead in our program for victory, which we'll achieve, than we were a few months ago. And when I said what I said, I was right. The second question you ask is, how long can you do this? As long as it takes to achieve this victory. And I think we're getting a lot closer. And as long as the people of Israel entrust it to me, that's all. As far as my health is concerned, it's fine.
Sky News.
Prime Minister asked among Sky News. I don't know whether we can see that wider map of Israel again, whether it's technically possible to get it back up on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, show it.
You said at the beginning, the slightly wide one. No, a bit wider. There we go. You said at the beginning of your speech that Hamas and others in the Middle East want to wipe Israel off the map. You have literally wiped the West Bank off that map. Is that official policy now, that the West Bank doesn't exist?
No, I didn't include the Dead Sea. It's not shown in the map. I didn't show the Jordan River. It's on this map. I didn't show the Sea of Galilee.
But those are geographical features. This is a population of 2 million Palestinians who live there.
Didn't get into that. I was talking about Gaza. There is a whole issue of what to do, how to achieve peace between us and the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. I didn't get into that. That's another press conference. I'll be happy to do it. To wipe out some of the misconceptions and the slanders and lies that are directed at us. We don't intend to drive these people away. They want to drive us away. It's a big difference. You know, every day they target us. You know what they teach in the schools, in the PA schools? They teach exactly the same thing that they teach, the same textbooks, as in the same textbooks here in the PA schools as here. Same thing. Israel has to be destroyed. Kill as many Jews, pay for slay. The more Jews, the more Israelis you killed, the more you get paid. There's a difference in strategy. You know, Hamas believes that the way to destroy Israel is through outright terror and military confrontation immediately, backed by Iran. It's all part of the Iranian axis. The Palestinian Authority believes that the way to do it is by ICC, by having lawfare, absurd charges leveled at Israel and its leaders, including me. Enormous pressure to drive Israel to indefensible boundaries, where the boundaries would be right here, right next to Tel Aviv. That's it. 8, 10 miles from the sea, and then push to the sea. There's a difference. But the goals are the same. No, I didn't show that, but if you want, Alistair, next press conference, I guarantee you can ask all the questions you want, and I'll give you the answers, the truth, the facts that your readers and viewers do not get. In this horrible harangue of this one democracy fighting this just war with just means against the most horrendous savages on the planet. And Israel is being condemned. Israel is being pilloried. Israel is being slandered. This is something that not only affects the Jewish people. 80 years after the Holocaust, when our enemies are openly declaring that they'll make another Holocaust, it also affects a beleaguered democracy that is fighting the battle of all democracies against these barbarians. So yes, I'll be happy to talk about the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority, you name it. And in fact, I'll let you name it, because one thing I do not fear is tough questions. And I hope you accept some direct answers.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, Antonio Pita, El País newspaper. First time I came here as a correspondent, it was 2007. I was here for 7 years, then I came back right before the elections. I find it hard to recall a speech in which you mentioned Philadelphia corridor, at least gave it a lot of importance. Why suddenly in the last few weeks it seems that the future of Israel depends on that? Thanks.
Now, I hope that it's your own recollection and not something that you heard on the news or in our, in some of our reporting. Netanyahu has not mentioned the Philadelphia corridor. All right. So here's what I said. Okay, when I resigned from Sharon's government because I couldn't agree with the policy, and so I resigned. I was finance minister, and I said to him in the resignation letter, I said, at least, you should stay in the Philadelphia corridor, because otherwise this is going to become Hamastan, which it did. Okay, and I talked about it before that too. Okay. And then now you talk about this war, right? We had a lot of discussions in security meetings about the Philadelphia corridor, about the smuggling, and we had an option. What do we do? What do we do about it? Because the only way to deal with it really was to conquer Gaza. But we knew we didn't have neither the domestic legitimacy nor the international legitimacy to do it. Look how much problem we have now after this worst savagery that was delivered to the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and we still have. Look at all the questions you're asking me. Look at all the international pressure that is put on Israel. So certainly we didn't have that legitimacy before the October 7th massacre. And so what we did was basically attack Hamas every time, attack it again and again and again. I, as Prime Minister, led 4 of these operations in which we killed 6,000 of their terrorists. We killed their military chief, Jabri was called, and others. But we didn't go in. The only way we could deal with the Philadelphia corridor was to conquer Gaza. And the only way we could conquer Gaza was to have the legitimacy that we lacked until October 7th happened. Once it happened, we went into Gaza, and guess what? The first time I talked about the Philadelphia corridor, I called it the Southern Sugar Drumi, the Southern barrier. I said, we need a Southern barrier. Okay? And we discussed 2 possibilities. One, the Philadelphia corridor, and one, 1 or 2 kilometers north of that's not important. Okay? But it was clear you have to stop. Can you show that map again of the perforation? Yeah, no, not that one. Not that one either. We have to stop this. If we don't stop this, we've achieved nothing. So I spoke about it publicly. First time in November. When the war began, October, right? But that's my first public statement. Now, You should check this out. My research team, just by punching out, found 8 references every month about the southern corridor. I can tell you that in our internal discussions, in the War Cabinet and in the General Cabinet, I talked about it a lot. So here again is the misrepresentation of fact. Oh, we're using this as a pretext. This is just a political ploy. It's not a political ploy. You have to be blind not to see this. I'm not blind, nor are the people of Israel. They overwhelmingly support keeping this corridor in our hands because they understand that this is something that we must do both to achieve our goal of winning the war, but also to put the pressure to release our hostages, and we'll do so. But I can tell you, it's not the first time that I talked about it.
Last question.
Patrick Kingsley, New York Times. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for this. Patrick Kingsley, New York Times. Thank you for this press briefing. If the Philadelphia corridor was so important to you, why did the Israeli army not head for it first when you invaded Gaza in late October? If it was so important to you, why was it not even mentioned in the May 27th proposal that Israel made to the negotiators? If the disengagement from Gaza was so important to you, why did you personally vote for it at that time before leaving government? And finally, you mentioned Israel not intending to administer Gaza after the war. Does that mean you can unequivocally rule out settling Gaza with Israeli civilians?
I don't have my pen here, so if you can give me a pen, I'll write down all these questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I explained that it was important enough that we had it. It was clear we were going to conquer all of Gaza, that we didn't have a choice. But the sequencing, and I won't get into the military consideration, which the cabinet accepted in this case. We were uniform on that. We didn't know when we go in what exactly would happen. We knew there was a vortex, a main nerve center in Gaza City, around the Shifa Hospital and elsewhere, and this was the progression that was there was supposed to continue with one fell swoop. We had a lot of obstacles to get down to Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor. Took us about 3 months, but the idea was to do it very fast, and we did it. Now, once we've done it, obviously we're going to keep it. You ask, why, if it was so important for you, did you vote for the disengagement? Number one, I voted in a capital in the Knesset for, I was finance minister. I wanted to do some important reforms that revolutionize the Israeli economy. You can see it in the skyline of Tel Aviv and Israel's other cities. Basically a free market reforms. And I was caught in a quandary because I wanted to complete those reforms, but I knew that once the government actually votes to tear out the communities and to get out, that's it. My reforms would be stymied. Israel would not have would not become the technological and economic powerhouse that it became. So the question was, and the government didn't quite do this. They were careful. The government in which I was a part, they basically said, okay, we haven't decided yet on whether we leave. What we're going to do is create the possibility by the Knesset bills that if we decide to leave, there will be compensation for those who leave. That was the vote, the famous vote that people show on television. So anyway, when the actual vote came in the cabinet to leave, I said, you have to stay in there. You cannot leave the Philadelphia corridor. And I resigned from the government. So I voted against it. That's important. You asked another question.
Why wasn't it even mentioned in the 27th of May proposal of the Philadelphia corridor? And secondly, can you rule out resettling
Yeah. Well, the May 27th Israeli proposal, the May 27th American proposal, said that did not contradict in any way our going into the Rafah crossing. We talked with the Americans. We said in a number of conversations we have to deal with the southern barrier. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to deal with it. But it doesn't contradict. There's no contradiction between that and the May 27th proposal. And we're quite clear about it. And I think the Americans know our position quite well. As far as reselling, I don't think it's a realistic goal. I said it. I said it in front of my cabinet. I haven't changed my view. And the people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Marie Finoshina, RT. Mr. Prime Minister, we've heard a lot today about Philadelphia corridor. I have one very specific question.
What do you represent, sorry?
RT, Russia Today television. Was the Israeli control over the Philadelphia corridor ever mentioned in any of the versions of the deal that Hamas accepted? And today, is it the only obstacle to the deal, the only disagreement between the sides, or there are other disagreements? Thank you very much.
Well, there's a premise in your question that's simply wrong. You say, was it mentioned in the deal that Hamas accepted? Hamas didn't accept the deal. On the May 27th proposal, they had 29 changes, corrections, 29, which effectively vitiated any of them from any meaning. It was a rejection. In fact, a detailed rejection of the deal. So while we accepted it as is, we didn't make any changes. And I didn't bring any new condition. Anything that contradicts anything that is said there, Hamas basically wiped the floor with it. I mean, they wouldn't accept it. They didn't accept that, and they didn't accept the bridging proposal. And Al-Khia, who is the deputy, Sinwar's deputy, said 2 days ago, so we remain steadfast. What do we want? No, they didn't accept it. No, they didn't. Again, you want the facts. Okay, so the fact is they rejected the May 20th. They said they accepted it, but they have 27 or 29 rather corrections. That's like I don't know. The German government saying we accept the American proposal, but we're going to stay in Berlin. We're going to control Germany. You're going to go out, and we can resupply ourselves. But we accepted your proposal. That doesn't mean anything. They put in 29 corrections that essentially was a sound and detailed rejection of the deal. I don't care, how they frame it for public purposes. It's meaningless. We know the truth. And again, they flatly rejected the bridging proposal. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, Al-Khia flatly rejected it again. And he said, what does he say? He basically says, Israel has to get out, everything, including the Philadelphia corridor, and we can rearm ourselves and do October 7th again and again and again. So it's not that they accepted it. You asked the second question, which is?
Is Philadelphia corridor and...
Oh, is it the only obstacle? No, it's not. In fact, everything. We have the Philadelphia corridor. We have the what's the ratio of hostages to civilians to terrorists who are released? Do we have a veto power over these terrorists because some of them committed the worst atrocities you can imagine? Should they come back to Judea, Samaria, or can we take them out of the country, and so on and so on and so on? I mean, the whole thing has not been resolved. Hamas has rejected everything. And we're trying to find some area to begin the negotiations. They refuse to do that. 2 days ago, he said, no, there's nothing to talk about. So I hope that changes, because I want those hostages out. I want those families, I want those mothers to see their loved ones. I don't want to see a repetition of what what I saw in Ashkelon, you know, these tortured souls. I want them to have happiness, just like the ones that we rescued, were able to rescue. We took out, we brought 117 people alive. And by the way, I insisted in the first deal, we talked about 50, and I said, no, we're going to get 30 more out. And I talked to President Biden, he helped, and I appreciate it. And we brought it up from 50 to 80. That's 80 souls that came back to life. Their families came back to life. So, look, I'll do everything I can to get these people out. But the pressure should be directed where it belongs. It's not on Israel. It's on Hamas. Thank you all. You've been very, very patient.